Do you struggle with addiction? Do you struggle with any kind of addiction? Food, sex, drugs, thoughts? In this video, I'm going to be breaking down addiction from a slightly different perspective, and I'm going to be using one of the gene keys. I don't know if you're familiar with the gene keys in order to do it. My name is Adam. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm a freedom and clarity coach. Before I get started, I just wanted to let you know I have a free energy clearing in the description below. This is like a 20-minute meditation to help you release some of your old patterns, blocks, beliefs, etc. Okay, now let's begin. So I got very into the gene keys at the beginning of last year, depending upon when you're watching this. And the gene keys I found to be immensely helpful. I highly recommend this book to anybody who's on a spiritual path or a self-development path. There's some really deep insights and wisdom in this book, as well as being sort of a meditative read where as you read it, it kind of helps you to heal your DNA and the patterns in your DNA that we all have in various levels. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about was actually in astrology what my Chiron is, the gene key for my Chiron, which is gene key 24. And in the gene keys, it's very important to understand that how energy works is things aren't one or the other. You know, we've lived in polarity for so long, and we still kind of have this Old Testament, like this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong sort of perspective. And the way energy works is more in levels and layers. So like what might be, a dark or more negative perspective of something transforms into something more positive as you embrace it and move up the scale. So when you resist it or push it aside, you're not really doing anything but perpetuating the division, which is what's causing whatever the negative energy is to sort of hold sway to begin with. So the gene keys, each gene key has 3 states. One is what is called the shadow state. The next state is called the gift state. And then the third one is the city, I think is how it's pronounced. That's like the transcendent, enlightenment sort of state. And gene key 24, the shadow is addiction. The shadow is addiction, and the gift is invention. So if you begin to understand the concept, addiction turns into creativity and invention. And I think this is an incredibly benevolent perspective, as well as being a true perspective for most, if not all, addicts, because addicts tend to be so because there's a sensitivity, there's a depth, there's a wisdom within them. And because of that, life is often a little bit harder, because when you feel more, you feel everything more. You feel the good things more, and you feel the bad things or the uncomfortable things more. And if you're highly sensitive and all of the darkness becomes overwhelming, we reach for things, anything, in order to kind of numb or quell some of the hypersensitivity to the pain. And one of the most beneficial perspectives of seeing it in this light is that you become more compassionate toward yourself if you're an addict, and more compassionate toward other addicts, because whenever there's a level of judgment, or you're like a bad person for whatever you did, it's very hard to heal, because you're just punishing yourself, which is why you acted out to begin with. So the shadow is addiction, but addiction isn't as simple as, oh, I need drugs, or oh, I need sex, or this behavior is what's defining my addiction. Behavior does define addiction, but what comes before any behavior is the thought. Now, you can reverse engineer this from any perspective. You can reverse engineer a behavior by changing your thought, and you can start to change your thoughts by reverse engineering a behavior. They go hand in hand, but it is important to understand that fundamentally the root of it is the thought. And one of the things he breaks down in the shadow aspect of this gene key of addiction is that addiction is rooted in your thoughts. It's rooted in the same repetitive thought over and over and over again. And if you think about any addictive behavior, that's essentially what it is. you're reaching for something to fill a void again and again and again and again, in spite of however many horribly negative consequences are being reflected back to you because of the behavior. You don't stop doing it. You just keep, it's like, I don't know what else to do, so I'm just going to do this again. No more time, just one more time, right? That's the heroin addict sort of motto. It's like, this is the last time, I'm never doing it again. Okay, just one more time, and then I'm going to stop. And that goes on for years. It's a repetitive thought pattern. It's a repetitive behavior. And one of the things that I love about seeing it from this perspective is it unifies everybody, because when we understand that we all have repetitive, crappy, shitty thoughts, then we don't feel so isolated and separate and left out anymore, because everybody has this problem. It is important, if you're a crackhead or you're a meth addict or if you're a heroin addict or you're an alcoholic, to understand that your repetitive behavior and thought is a little more life-threatening than somebody who, I don't know, maybe is a sex addict, or that can be life-threatening too. But, obviously than somebody who has, a bad shopping habit or something. Yes. And you want to understand that, but you also want to get rid of the stigma of you're like so fucked up and such a freak and such an isolated outcast piece of shit that doesn't belong in society, and you're sick and you're always going to be sick and you're never going to get better, and you have to accept that basically you're subpar for the rest of your life, because it's bullshit. That's not true, and that actually prevents you from truly healing. So the repetitive forms of thought, and that's anything. That's any thought. So it's basically the mind getting stuck in a loop. All behavior is based in habit. All interaction is based in our habits. And we can stop old habits and create new habits. But in order to do that, we have to see the habit for what it is. We have to see and observe the thought for what it is, and step back and let go of it to some extent. And when we do that, what he says, when you start to notice the gap between the thoughts, what that does is it opens the door for like the light of divinity to come in and to heal and to create something new, which is invention, coming up with a new idea, coming up with a new pattern, coming up with a new thought. But you have to observe and be aware of the fact that you're just simply running the same pattern, the same program, the same thought over and over and over again before you can be aware of that and begin to step back and go into the observer self. That's what meditation does. And break up the patterns. And if you liken this to like where the real addiction wound comes from, like I said, it's that sort of hole in the self where we're disconnected from spirit, because that ultimately is addiction. I don't care what fucking the scientists or the doctors or anybody says. There's a hole in the self because you're disconnected from source. You're disconnected from divinity. You don't feel loved, you don't feel full. But if you look at what the addiction pattern does, doing the same rote thing over and over again is what's blocking out the openness to spirit, to allow new energy to come in, to allow source energy to come in, to allow all the parts of you that have separated from source to connect to it and begin to heal. Now, of course, there's a lot of other things that need to be done. There's behaviors that need to be changed. There's contrary action that needs to be taken. All of that is absolutely valid and relevant. But it's important to really understand the basis of something, or we get lost in the minutia and we get lost trimming weeds and we never get to the root of the weed to pull it out. So when you step back and identify that essentially your addiction comes from these rote repetitive thought patterns, and those rote repetitive thought patterns are non-beneficial to you, because anything that's too closed, too repetitive, is closing and like kinking off the channel to spirit, is going to create that separation, that isolation, and that loneliness. When you understand that's where it comes from, you understand that by stepping back, observing these patterns, taking a new action step, thinking a new thought, and going into the silence, which is actually the city, that's where everything new comes in. And it's where the connection to something greater than yourself comes in. So the gift to addiction, the addiction gene key, is invention. And again, invention comes from something new. The most important thing to healing addiction is finding that connection to spirit, finding that connection to newness. But it can be very difficult for addicts especially to just start meditating. You know, it's good to meditate, but a lot of times, like when we're creative or we're creative oriented, it can be hard to go just right into the silence. It can be hard to just step back and meditate for 3 hours and just feel the light of God come in. That's a good goal to have. I also find it's important that, like, you know, when you're very analytical or mental, it helps to give the mind an understanding of what it's doing and where your goal is. So how do you start to enter into the energy of invention? So first is awareness. The first step to healing anything is awareness. It's basically awareness, clearing the patterns that don't work, healing the trauma, and wiring in a new pattern. That's the step. That's basically the process for all healing modalities to God and back. There's no exception to that rule. There's different ways to do it. There's different ways to approach it. Essentially, it's you have to have awareness of what the problem is. You begin to heal the wound or the origin trauma. You clear what doesn't work, and then you invite something new in. That's why everywhere you go, you know, every 5 seconds, every spiritual blog or, you know, Instagram channel is always talking about, it's time to release what no longer serves you and call in what does. That's all that ever happens over and over and over and over again through infinity for all of us as we evolve through layers of ourself in cycles and spirals. That's it. So invention. If you can meditate, that's awesome. If you can take new actions, like I said, action and thought are directly connected and each feed into the other. So if you can start to take new actions, you can start to do new things. You're breaking up that monotony, rote, repetitive sort of thinking pattern with a new behavior, and you literally start to wire in new circuits in your brain through activity and through action. And you will have new experiences when you take new actions. And when you have new experiences, you start to break down the same old basic experience, thought pattern, looping. And you can do this in very simple ways. You know, it's like anything you can do to break up the monotony is very, very important and valid. Walking a different way to work, walking a different way home, taking a new class, learning a new trait, learning a new skill, learning a new hobby, reaching out to somebody, doing something you wouldn't normally do, talking to somebody in a supermarket. I need to start doing that because I can't really recommend people do that if I don't also do it. Right? Any new step is very helpful. And it starts to create this feeling of newness, because essentially where the matrix gets you, if you want to get into the matrix, is it basically predicts everything that you're going to do, and it programs you to behave like an automaton. And essentially the matrix is the energy of addiction, because it's getting people into a state of fear, because that's where the addiction comes from. It's from a fear. It comes from fear. Fear shuts off the flow of spirit. It shuts down your channel to spirit, and you start doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again because you're scared of doing something new. You're scared of going through the fear. You're scared of source because you spent so much time blocking it out. You now have a belief that source is negative or bad or whatever it is, or a new thing is going to hurt you, or the uncertain and the unknown is dangerous. And so you block it out. But out of the unknown comes spirit. Out of the unknown comes invention. Out of the unknown comes creativity. Out of the unknown comes a new pattern. That's the essence of breaking addiction. And out of the unknown is love. Out of the unknown is love. Confusion essentially is the mind trying to wrap itself around infinite potential and struggling with it. When you're confused and you let go, you understand that you're just reaching into divinity. And when you let go, and this is the essence of this Gene Key too, when you let go and allow, and you understand that you don't need to have the answer today, and you're not going to figure everything out this moment, and you step back and you let it happen, that's when revelation comes. That's when insights come. That's when realizations come. That's why most creative people get their ideas when they're going on a walk, or they're in the shower, or they're watching TV. They're not thinking about it. They're not forcing it with their brain, doing the same thing. I got to figure it out, creating that addictive loop. So this is just the beginning of the essence of how to start to heal addiction. And there's so many layers to this and levels to this, and clearing your trauma and inner child work and all that stuff, of course. But it's very important to understand this, because what it does is it begins to unify everyone, and it begins to heal that wound of feeling like you're different and separate. You're the same as everyone else. We're all stuck in cycles of thought. So let me know how this goes. Let me know if you have any questions, revelations, breakthroughs. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much. I look forward to next time, and peace.